What is up, guys? For today's random video, I decided to make beer. That's right, beer. So, quick disclaimer, if you're not 21 years of age, please exit the video. The video is not intended for children or adults under the age of 21. If you are of legal drinking age, that is in the United States, you're more than welcome to watch the video. But, as I was saying, I decided to make beer out of using this. This is a recipe kit that I got from Northern Brewer. It's the India Pale Ale Chinook IPA. And this is an extract kit that I got from my Northern Brewer's equipment. So it came along with the equipment that I ordered. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what we got inside. All right, so here's the recipe kit that came with my Northern Brewer equipment. This is their 5-gallon Chinook IPA. In the box, there's 6 pounds of Pilsen malt syrup or liquid malt extract, same thing. Pilsen DME or dried malt extract, 1 pound of that. 3 ounces of Chinook hops. Safe Ale US-05. Some priming sugar and a couple other things in here. Now my plans for this recipe kit, again, it is 5 gallons. I'm the only person that drinks beer in my house. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, and I'm going to show you how I did it, is I'm going to go ahead and split this recipe into 2. Let's open it up and I'll discuss more on that in a moment. As you can see, the box is pretty much empty, but I'll show you what I did. So this is the instructions for the recipe kit. I'm going to split this into 2.5 gallon batches. For the first one, I'm going to brew it exactly word for word how Northern Brewer intended it to be, so that I can experience it just like they wanted me to. And that's going to be 100% done their way. The other one is going to be slightly altered. I might change the hops. I might do an addition somewhere towards the end of the boil or something. But for the first one, it's going to be exactly this. Inside the box, you also get a muslin bag. You get some priming sugar. I use the sugar tablets to go into the bottles, but this is always good to keep on hand just in case I run out. It also comes with labels for your bottles. This is the Pilsen Light dried malt extract. It's 1 pound. I still have to split this. And in order to split my recipe in half, I ended up using this kitchen scale. I put a bowl on it. I zeroed the whole thing with the bowl on it, and then I go ahead and drop this in, half of it, and that's how I separate it. I do have a vacuum sealer that does canning and it does plastic, so it's very versatile, and I'll show you here in just a moment. As a matter of fact, I'll keep this right out here, because what I did was I took the grains, the steeping grains that came in the box, and I halved it. This is about 1 pound of steeping grains that Northern Brewer includes in their kit. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you that it's halved. I did use a bowl and I did zero out the bowl, but let's weigh this here. 8.5, 8.6-ish. It's like right on the cusp of 8.5, 8.6. This is what I'm gonna be using tomorrow. These grains here that I've halved from this bag here. And this bag is sealed, by the way. I don't know if you guys can tell, there's a line going right across the center here. And that's fully sealed. That is not going to open. So if I attempt to open it, the Ziploc part of it opens, but the rest of it is sealed. All right, so let's weigh this just to show you. 8.5 ounce. So good enough for me. I did the exact same thing with the hops. Again, the kit includes 3 ounces of Chinook hops. And I ended up taking the 1 ounce and turning it into a 1/2 ounce. Again, my vacuum sealer is pretty nice because it does take all the air right out of it. So the hops look like this, and they're completely vacuum sealed. I've even written here Chinook hops 1/2 ounce, and I've actually double sealed it. So these will last quite a bit without losing any of the flavor. There's no oxygen going into it. Also, these very robust vacuum sealing bags are meant to be going into the freezer for long term, so that's really nice. And again, there's 3 packets of this stuff. The yeast that came in the pack, I'm going to go ahead and use the entire thing. I'm not going to go worrying about saving half of this or pouring only half of it. I'm going to go ahead and throw the whole thing in. I don't think it'll do any damage. But when I decide to make the other half of the batch, I'm just going to go ahead and buy another packet of yeast. And I might even change the type of yeast that I use for that second half. For the 6 pounds of the liquid malt extract, I ended up taking this whole thing and weighing 3 pounds of it into mason jars. And this is exactly half. I know it doesn't look it because I'm tipping it, but it is exactly half. The mason jars that I used, one was this one here, and this actually weighs about 2 pounds. I zeroed the scale with the glass alone, and then I threw the liquid malt extract until I reached 2 pounds. And then I did the same with this one. When I reached 1 pound, I stopped. Now, it's pretty well full, and they're sealed really well. I don't know if you can tell that divot in here. This is not raised at all. It's 100% sealed. My vacuum sealer that I use for the hops, for this, also has an attachment that covers the top of the mason jar, and it sucks all the air out of it, so it seals almost instantly. And that's how I'm able to keep this. These have been sitting in the refrigerator since last night when I halved the recipe, but I'm sure they'll stay fine until I decide I want to make the other half in about a month. So, but yeah, there it is. This is the kit that came with my Northern Brewer equipment, and hopefully it all turns out well. All right, so it's the night before our brew day, and I decided to make a quick video showing you guys the equipment I'm going to be using to make this beer. Now, everything has been cleaned, okay? So the last time I used this stuff, the last batch that I made sure that I cleaned it right after. I washed it all, sanitized it, and then stored it away. And it's always good to have that sort of practice where once you use something, you kind of rinse it, clean it, stow it so that it's not dirty when you need it. Let's start over here with the pot. It's a 3-gallon pot. Again, I'm making a 2.5 gallon batch. But this pot can hold 3 gallons of water. I'm actually just going to be using 2 gallons of water because I don't want to cause a boil over. So it does have a lid, and the lid will be used only when I am cooling. You want to make sure you're not covering the wort as it's boiling, because it's got to release a lot of toxins and whatnot. But this pot, really useful to me. It fits this range, and it heats up pretty quickly, so that's not a bad thing. For stirring everything up, I'm going to be using this spoon that came with the Northern Brewer kit that I got. I'm going to be using a thermometer that came with the Northern Brewer kit. I've got a hygrometer for getting the gravity, original gravity, and then the final gravity to determine what the ABV is going to be on this beer. I'm also going to be using a hop spider. I got got this online, and it does wonders to keep all the hops and debris out of the fermenter. So, and it sits pretty good inside this pot. Don't worry about it. The hops will get extracted. They're not kind of limited by the hop spider. I tend to stir the hop spider from time to time also, so it's fine. I ended up getting a wort chiller. As a matter of fact, I'm going to post a picture of what it looks like right now so that you guys can see what it looks like and kind of how I modified it. Here's a picture of it. So that's how it looked when it was sent to me. And it was okay. The only problem is that it was very straight. And so when you put it into this pot, I don't know if you guys can see the spoon, but it was sort of sitting in this angle. And I'm sorry to say, but it wasn't the best design, because it just, like, 60% of it was sticking out of the wort. And it was kind of difficult. You could stir it, yes, it was nice for that, but I ended up altering it a little bit. In order to alter it, I bought a pipe bending tool, and I bent it so that it would fit the pot quite nicely, as you can see. And so it sits right down in there, and literally all of it gets submerged into the wort. And I could still move it up and down and move it left and right and stir it around. So it's a big difference having it like this. The other way was just too straight, and as you can see, even just angling it this way, there was a lot of stuff sticking out of the wort. Now, I didn't bend it to the most beautiful looking thing, but it works for my needs, and it gets in there and it does the job it needs to do. All right, let me move this real fast and show you the last thing. All right, so the last thing I'm going to show you is the fermenter that I'm going to be using. I ended up getting this from More Beer, I believe, and it's a Fur Monster. Now, this is a 3-gallon fermenter. It's got a bung and an airlock. And this thing is really nice. The only problem that I had with this is that it didn't have the markings for the gallons. So I ended up having to do that myself. So I poured a gallon here and marked it with a Sharpie on the outside. And then I did half a gallon every other one. So on the way up, you got 1 gallon, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and this is where I'm going to be filling up to, since I'm making a 2.5 gallon batch. And then this fold right here is actually 3 gallons. And so I've got a little bit of head space here. So I don't technically need to worry about a blow-off tube or anything like that. It should be fine. It did come with a spigot, which is nice, because I can just connect the hose to this and put it into my bottling bucket. But yeah, that's the equipment I'm going to be using tomorrow to get all this started. One more thing I wanted to show you though, with this wort chiller, I also got the connectors for the hose, but this is going to be connecting to my faucet in the kitchen. So yeah, that's the equipment that I'm going to be using tomorrow, and I cannot wait to get this thing started. All right, so it's 9:45 on a Sunday, May the 1st, and as you can see, I've switched the pot from what I said I was going to use last night. This is my 5-gallon pot, and I think I'm going to use this because I kind of want to start off with the full amount of liquid, 2.5 gallons. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, dropping in here. I am using spring water from my local store. Alright, so that's about 2.5 gallons of water. I'm not stressing too much if it's more or less, but this is what we're going to start off with, and we're going to start off with it on high and get that to a boil. I will be covering the water until it comes up to temperature. Actually, not a boil. I'm going to be bringing it up to 155 degrees so that I can get the steeping grains in there and letting them steep for a little bit. We'll come back once the water is to temperature, and then I'll throw the grains in. Alright, so as the water is warming up to 155, I decided to change the lid, kind of give you guys a better look. Plus it fits nicely where I can actually attach the steeping grain bag and pinch it with the lid a little bit while it's steeping. But for those that don't know, you need 4 things to make beer. You need water, which is in here. You need yeast. You need grains. And you need hops. Now, if this is a sort of like a mini mash type of thing going on, if it were pure extract, like the liquid malt extract that I got or the dried malt extract that I have, that would be just an extract type of thing. But because I have specialty grains, they kind of consider it a mini mash or a partial grain. Now, in order to get malt extract, whether it's dry malt extract or liquid malt extract, basically you take grains of whatever recipe you're deciding to make. You take the grains and you cook them down to make the extract. So with an extract kit, you're kind of just cutting that hour process of making your own extract with grains. So it's not as, custom in a sense, so you can't make the brew as 100% like you want it because somebody else made the extract for you. But it's still a really efficient way for new brewers or people that are trying to get into brewing to sort of give them a little help where they don't have to do one major step. But yeah, let's continue to wait to make sure that this reaches 155. Once it does, I'll go ahead and throw the grains into the water and steep them. I'm going to throw them into this muslin bag, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of bop it up and down, kind of like tea, and then pinch it to the side of the pot so that it's just available for me to grab onto, and it's not going to burn my hands every time I try to reach for it in the water. All right, it's been a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and take the lid off of it and check the temperature to see if we're ready for our steeping grains. We want 155 to 160 is ideal. Let's check to see where that's at. I do apologize for any background noise. My family is here and they're active. We're looking at around 158. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat. Turn it all the way off. Put the thermometer away so that I don't ruin it. And we're going to go ahead and dip the steeping grains in there. Like I said, it's like tea. except it's got grains, malts, and as you can see, there's a lot of color coming out of it. These grains are going to give us a bit of mouthfeel, some flavor, but what they're really going to do is just going to give us all that color. As you can see, it's already turning into a completely different color than just clear water. I'm going to go ahead and set a timer for 20 minutes. And we're going to let the grains sit there for a little bit and steep and just extract all that color and all the flavor. So we'll be back in 20 minutes. All right, so we're a little less than a minute left in this steeping phase. Now there is a step that all grain brewers do after they get their grains in. They kind of rinse them out, or is what they call sparge. But I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to let this bag drain over the top of this for a little bit until I get as much of it out as I can, and then I'm just going to toss it in the trash. So I'm going to grab a bucket real quick to make sure I have it, or a little bowl so that I have it for the grains. I'll be right back. All right. That's another little thing you can do as well, so that it doesn't sit at the bottom of the pot. You can kind of clip it to either side. I had it pinched for a little bit with the lid, but I wanted some of this stuff to ventilate, so. There's a lot of little sugars in here that, okay. A lot of sugars that are in this bag still. You don't want to squeeze it because you can release some unwanted flavors, some tannins and whatnot. So it's dripping very slowly. I'm just going to go ahead and put this bowl underneath and set it aside. Now I'm going to cover it back up. Crank the heat all the way up to high, and we got to get this to a boil. Our next step is going to be to add the extracts. So it's going to be the dried malt extract and the liquid malt extract, but this needs to get to a boil first. Then I'm going to cut the heat on it and pour the liquid malt extract in, stirring it in vigorously. I don't want that stuff to settle down. The liquid malt syrup is very heavy, so it'll actually drop to the bottom of the pan and it can scorch, and you'll get some really bad flavors out of that. So I'm going to avoid that as much as possible. I'm going to actually move it away from the heat a little bit and stir that stuff in. We'll be back once this water starts to boil. Okay, great. I wasn't recording. All right, I just ended up cutting the heat from the pot. It was coming up to a boil. It was boiling a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the heat element. And I'm going to start adding the malt extract. It's a little tight there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and start adding the malt extract into it and stirring it in. Now this stuff, again, will settle at the bottom. You want to stir it in as best as possible. Now there's going to be a little bit left in here, and I did have it sitting in hot water, so it made it very easy for it to come out of the container. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of this wort. It's now wort because it's unfermented. There's no yeast in it yet, but you can add yeast and you got beer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up putting some of this water into the container, and then I'm going to shake it up a little bit. A lot of people throw this stuff away. They say it's good, I got most of it out, but this is where all of your sugars are at. And somebody went through the trouble to make it for you, and why not use it to make your beer that much better? All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set it aside for now. I'm going to shake it in a moment. Now I'm going to add the dried malt extract to it. This was measured. Remember, I had a pound. I ended up measuring half a pound of it. So I'm going to dump it in. You got to be careful because once steam hits this thing, it starts to clump up. So as you can see, it's already doing the thing. See? It starts to clump up right away as soon as steam hits it. This stuff is very fine, and any bit of moisture gets it sticky. And again, I'm going to go ahead and grab the most I can out of this, so I'm just going to do one of these. And that took care of most of that. Hopefully you guys can hear me over the sound of this pot, but all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring it back onto the heating element now that everything is stirred in pretty good, and turn the heat back on to get it back to a boil. And once it comes up to a boil, I'm going to start a 60-minute timer and put in my hops. So I'll be right back once this reaches a boil. Alright, so it's finally come up to a boil. It's not a huge rolling boil right now, but I can't sit here and wait much longer. Unfortunately, this stove does not do a good enough job to boil this amount of liquid. I'm going to give it a quick stir. And then I'm going to do my first hop addition. And the recipe calls for 1 ounce of the Chinook hops. Now, if you're doing the 5-gallon full recipe, go ahead and do that. But again, I'm doing half. So I'm going to cut this open and throw this ½ ounce in there. Grab my scissors, which were sanitized. I know that at this point it doesn't really matter, sanitized or not sanitized. It's once the wort has cooled down, or it's going to be cooled down, that's when you really need to sanitize everything, make sure you're good. But I'm going to go ahead and put my hop spider in and throw the hops in. And I'm going to set a timer for 60 minutes. All right, so it's there for 60 minutes. It's going to be boiling for that long. Now, for the hop additions, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the process. And this is again by the Northern Brewers recipe kit. So it calls for in the recipe for 1 ounce, and then ½ of an ounce at 10 minutes left in the boil. So 1 ounce at 60, ½ ounce at 10 minutes left of the boil, At 2 minutes left of the boil, they say throw the other half in, and then 1 week later, after the fermenter, after it's in the fermenter, you go ahead and throw the other 1 ounce. But again, I'm halving everything, so what I've done is I've weighed out exactly 0.25 ounces into this container, which is what I'm going to throw in next at the 10-minute left of the boil mark. So we'll come back in about 50 minutes and go ahead and do that. And at that time, I'm also going to throw in the wort chiller in there just to sanitize it as well. If I throw the wort chiller in there while it's piping hot, it will sanitize the wort chiller and I won't have to sanitize it any other way. So again, I'll be back with about 10 minutes or so left in the boil. All right, real quick, there's about 40 minutes left of the boil. I had to change locations. Unfortunately, my stove was not doing a good enough job getting the water on a rolling boil. Right now I have it hooked up to my propane burner, and this does a really good job at keeping that boil going. Go ahead and turn it down just a touch. You just kind of want to maintain the boil. Again, I have about 37 minutes or so left in the boil. So we'll let that do its thing. I am in the garage at the moment, but don't worry, there is plenty of ventilation. Ventilation, that's cracked over there. I have a mess in my garage, but that door is wide open. The screen is there, so we should be okay. All right, so I'll come back at 10 minutes left of the boil. All right, we got about 10 minutes left of the boil. I'm gonna go ahead and throw the other addition into the hop spider. And we're gonna let that go until we have 2 minutes left of the boil. And we'll come back. Real quickly, I'm just gonna show you guys what I do. I'm sorry about the background noise. In order to make sure I get it all absorbed into the wort, I put some of the liquid into the hop spider, and then I stir a little bit. All right, so we've got 2 minutes left of the boil. I forgot to mention that I added the hop spider in, sorry, not the hop spider, the wort chiller into the pot in order to sterilize it. So 2 minutes into the boil, we're gonna go ahead, or sorry, 2 minutes left of the boil. I'm gonna go ahead and throw these hops in there. Congratulations, babe. My wife won a giveaway. She's one of the luckiest people I know. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and let this boil in for 2 more minutes. And once we're done here, we'll go ahead and bring it inside and attach the wort chiller to our faucet and get this thing cooled down. All right, so we are back inside and I've connected the hose to the faucet. I'm gonna remove this hop spider and get that out of the way. Let it drain out a little bit. Now the cool thing is that that hop spider is going to keep all those hops out of the fermenter. I'm just going to go ahead and sit this in the bowl. That's out of the way. And I'm going to start cooling the wort with the wort chiller using the cold water. Now cold water comes in, it goes around the coils, it comes back out. All the hot water is kind of cooled down in a fast way so that I can go ahead and pitch the yeast. Once it's to temperature, which is around 68, 70 degrees, I'm gonna go ahead and pitch the yeast. So we'll go ahead and wait for this to cool down. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and check the temperature. It's been a few minutes now, and anything that goes into the wort at this point in time needs to be sanitized. If not, you can get an infection in your beer and then it's just done. But this thermometer, I've cleaned it and I've actually sanitized it with some Star San. I'm going to go ahead and check the temperature real quick, see where it's at. It's looking like it's at 100 degrees at the moment. That's super quick. This is the first time I've actually used this wort chiller in this big a pot. I thought it would take longer, but it seems to be doing quite a good job at cooling the wort down. Pretty impressed. Now, again, we're going to wait for the temperature to drop a little bit. I've got the yeast in some Star San. I've got Star San in my fermenter. I've cleaned it out and it's sanitizing at the moment. I've got the bung sanitized on the fermenter as well, and the airlock. So also the scissors that I'm going to be using to cut the bag, the hop packet, not a bag, but the hop packet, that is also going to be sanitized to make sure nothing contaminates the beer. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the water now, because it did reach a temperature of 75 degrees, and my hands are sanitized with the Star San, but some of these packets will actually tell you the ideal pitching temperature, and it says 71.6 at the high end. So that's perfectly fine. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to put this wort into my fermenter, and then from there I'm going to add refrigerated water, essentially, and go ahead and make sure that I got the 2.5 gallon batch that I was looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back with you guys. Alright, now that I've transferred it from the kettle into the fermenter, I filled it up to as high as it can go, obviously through the whole amount in there. But then I used the rest of the bottled water that I had that was refrigerated to get to the 2.5 gallon mark, and it worked out just great for me, because the gallon actually filled it up exactly to where I needed it to be. As you can see, there's a lot of sediment, and that's all gonna fall down, okay? But what I gotta do now is I gotta put the bung on top. I gotta go ahead and get a sample for the gravity reading. But right now, what I wanna do is I wanna put the bung into the top here, and then I just kind of want to shake it around a little bit and get some air to kind of cycle into the wort. That air is going to actually help the yeast Alright, I think that should be okay. When I poured the water, I did pour it at a really high altitude to kind of get it to air out a little bit. So now that that is done, I'm going to go ahead and get it to the edge and get a sample for the hygrometer reading for the original gravity. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and use this Ziploc bag that I normally attach. As a matter of fact, I'll hit it with some sanitizer first. And I'll go ahead and bag it up. I don't even know if you guys can see this. guess not. All right. Well, what I did was I put a Ziploc on the end of it just to prevent any leak or anything else from messing around with it. All right, so over here in the sanitizer solution, I've got the packet of yeast. I've got my scissors sanitized. I'm going to go ahead and spray them again though, just to make sure that they are 100% good. I'm going to remove the bung. And then I'm going to go ahead and pitch the yeast. Made a bit of a mess, but that's okay. Gonna go ahead and put the lid back on. Hand tight. I'm gonna go ahead and put the bung back on it. Pushing that down as best I can. Make sure it's airlocked. Just gonna give it a little bit of a stir. Sort of get the yeast incorporated there. You know what, since I have the thermometer sanitized, I'm gonna go ahead and stir it in just a little bit. All right, it should be okay. Put the bung back in, push it all the way down as best I can, keep it airtight. The airlock will go on the top. And I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's full to the lines. Just goes right in like so. All right, so let's take a quick look at the original gravity of the beer, or the wort. And it looks like it's sitting at 1050 at the moment. So 1.050. The recipe says it's supposed to be at 1053, but I got 1050, which is fine. All right, so to close out the video real quick, this Northern Brewer Chinook IPA recipe was fairly easy to follow. As a matter of fact, they did a great job with the instructions, giving you step-by-steps on how to do stuff and when to clean and all that stuff. This is a really good read. Now, I'm not sure if you can hear it, but it's already bubbling up, which is great. It's a great sign. But the kit was fairly good, fairly simple to use, fairly simple to follow. The next step will be 1 week out. I'm going to add the last bit of hops to the fermenter. That's called dry hopping. It's a term that they use after fermentation has begun, and then you add hops. But no, it's gonna sit in the fermenter for a week with the hops, and so at the 2 week point, I'm gonna go ahead and start bottling, and that'll take another 2 weeks for the carbonation to take full effect, and then refrigerate and drink. The only hiccup that I had was my stove. Unfortunately, my stove does not crank out enough power to keep that water boiling at a nice steady rolling boil. For some weird reason, it just cranks as high as it does and then cuts itself off after a while, which is kind of weird, and then it turns back on, so it doesn't keep that constant heat going. But I easily transferred over to my propane burner, and that worked out fine. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll try to make an update video on how it is, the bottling process, all that stuff. We'll see how that goes. But again, thank you for watching.